Alright, today we are working on our 2010 Kawasaki ZX-10. We are converting our 525 chain and sprockets to 520 chain and sprockets, as well as putting on a green chain to match the green on the bike and the steel braided lines. So we're going to get a lot more performance out of it, less rotating mass, and some visual enhancements. First thing that we want to do is ensure that we do have a 520 sprockets. This one doesn't say 520 on it, but I know that it is for sure. And a 520 chain. If we didn't, none of this would match up and we wouldn't be able to even run the bike. And I have seen people make that mistake before. First thing we want to do is pull off our sprocket cover, this piece right here, and then take off our front sprocket. That will allow us to pull it off. If we pull off the rear first and pull off the chain without pulling off the front sprocket, it gets really hard to pull off that front sprocket because nothing is keeping it still. When we go to pull off that sprocket, what we're going to need to do is down on the bottom here, there's part of this, it almost looks like a washer, but this metal tab is bent up. That's a locking tab, and it's designed to prevent this from coming undone at speed. So we need to stick a punch or something in here to bend this back down so that we can spin that off. Okay, got the nut pulled off. I did it using my impact driver, doesn't take much. Absolutely do not do it while the bike is in gear. Always have it in neutral to allow the wheel and the transmission gears to spin freely and not clash on one another when you're pulling that off. Okay, we pulled off the countershaft nut. Do it in neutral, don't do it while it's in gear. I use my impact drive. That is the easiest way to do it. You can put something between the wheel and the swing arm and back it off that way. Now we're going to go ahead and pull off our chain. The easiest way to do that is using a cutting wheel. Some people will grind off one of the outsides of the link and then push the pin through, and that's great if you plan on reusing the chain. If not, you can just go ahead and cut it. This chain is going in the trash when it's all done. Alright, we got our chain off. We just went ahead and cut it off with the cutting wheel. It was really easy. We cut it off in this area here. So now we can even just pull this off. This is just there. One thing you want to note is the orientation. Sometimes these are offset. One side will have a further extrusion than the other. This one's neutral, which is fine. And look at the condition of the teeth. That'll kind of tell you the alignment, how the alignment was, if there's any issues there, or if the chain tension was too much or not enough. We are going from the 525 chain to a 520 and a 17 tooth sprocket to a 16 tooth sprocket, which will give us more acceleration and slightly less top speed. We're going to go ahead and swap the one in the front now, and then pull off the rear tire and swap the sprocket in the rear. Alright, we got the new sprocket spun on. I did drive it on with this while in neutral, but it's not very tight because there's no chain on it. We need to put the chain on it before we can tighten it all the way down and bend our locking tab over it. So now we're going to pull off our rear tire and swap out the rear sprocket. Alright, this part's pretty simple. We got our wheel off. We're going to take these bolts off in a star pattern, so always go the furthest one away as you back them off. It's always good practice to do so. And the torque on these is about 40 pounds when you torque them back on with the new sprocket. Just wanted to show you guys the difference between the 520 and the 530 sprocket in thickness. You can see that the 530 on top is quite a bit thicker. And then if you look at the difference between the two teeth down in the rear, you can also see that the sprocket is slightly larger. So as far as mass goes, we're probably staying near about the same, but we're able to achieve more teeth by doing that. If we were to do that with the 530 chain, we'd have a thicker chain, thicker sprockets, and actually gain mass rather than lose it. Okay, our new sprocket's on. I did run it in at a light torque with my impact driver. I'm going to go over and torque these down. It's important that you have an even clamping load on all the bolts, or else that sprocket will be slightly off and cause oscillation as it rotates around, which will cause drag and increased wear. And we don't want that. So either hand tighten them or lightly run them in with an impact. Make it so that you can still turn it with a torque wrench, and that will actually torque evenly. Okay, so we're torqued. Make sure you put the spacers back in on the right sides. We don't have to worry about fighting the chain on this one because there is no chain at all. And then we're going to go ahead and clamp our castle nut down to about 70 to 80 pounds. And then you should reuse your cotter pins. You should not reuse your cotter pins. Just replace them with the new one. Sometimes they are salvageable to where you can reuse them without them breaking, and it's okay to do so. Even though the manual says not to, it is going to do its job. Okay, we've got our wheel on, spacers in. Their nut is just hand tight. That's not even tight. I just have it on there to keep everything captive more so than anything else. Now what we need to do is run our chain tensioner all the way in so that it's flush with our lock nut. So the first thing you need to do on each side is to break this lock nut, back it off, run it back towards the head of the tensioner, and then from there run the tensioner head bolt, the head of the bolt, down all the way till it's flush with the swing arm. And we'll do that for both sides. What that will allow us to do is to feed our chain on and to have the rear wheel pretty much as forward as possible. Some people want to make the wheelbase longer, so they'll move it further back to try to add another link. Making the wheelbase longer does help with corner exit. The bike's more stable under full throttle. You feel less kicking and bucking. But it does turn in slower, and your mid-corner speed is about the same for each. So it depends on what you want. Faster entry speed or better exit. Typically people want better exit, but it's not much better even if you move the nut, the axle further back to extend your wheelbase. Alright, we got everything flush. That allows us to have our axle as forward as possible. So now what we're going to do is feed our chain on and around our sprocket through the chain area, I don't know what you want to call it, down and over the front sprocket, around and down, and we want to have the two halves sitting right about here so we can measure the length, and I'll show you guys what we're going to do from there. Okay, so as you're feeding the chain through, go ahead and feed it up on top of this sprocket, roll it around through and on top of the front sprocket. As you do so, make sure you guys keep the chain off the ground. As you can see, I have it in the bag, fully in the bag, not touching the ground, not picking up any dirt or debris. Any dirt or debris that gets on the chain, especially with all the lube that's on it, it's only going to add premature wear, and it will wear out that much quickly. By the way, I really like the look of this chain. This is an EK chain. They do make really good colors in their chains to match different bikes. I've never had a problem with the quality. Some people say they aren't the best, and the many EK chains I've used, I haven't seen that any less quality in them comparatively to anybody else. But it is a good chain. I really like the color of it with the bike, and it's going to look great with the steel braided lines. Okay, we've got the chain fed through. We have a little bit of slack in the chain, which is what we want. Here's where the magic is. So this link is the link we're going to shave off to replace with our master. Normally if we put a master link in, it would link from here to here. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to grind off just the tip of this pin, and we're going to press it with our chain press tool. and then that'll allow us to put our master link in and have our chain the right length and on. All right, let's get to it. Okay, so I've got the rivet ground off. It is there. What you're seeing is the rest of the pin. Here's where we're going to need some special tools. This is a chain press, and it's also a riveting tool, but right now we're using the press side of it. We're going to press out that pin, and you need to have the special tool to allow the pin to go through the hole back on that side and still have force up against the outer part of the link to not bend the link at all. Keeps the link nice and strong. I will have these on my site, and there will be a link in the video. And it is about the cheapest you can get this part for, and it will be the exact part you need, and the part will be quality and last. It's not just something cheap. It's something that I do have my dealer license for, and I'm able to get to you guys at a pretty good price. Okay, so we got the pin pushed out, and now we're ready to put in our master link. As you can see, we still have the O-rings that were on there from the links that we took out, and that's fine. We can leave them on there. They're brand new, haven't been used yet. We do have 4 O-rings that come in the bag, and then some lithium grease to put on there to keep them greased up. We will use 2 of those 4, but not replace the other 2 that are already on there. The other thing is this master link. They're really nice because they are color coded to match the chain. We need to put it in this way so that the side that we need to rivet is on the outside. So we'll put the O-ring on after we lube it up, push it through, and then have this other side exposed, and I'll show you guys what to do from there. Alright, we've got our master link in. We need to put this on to cover the master link and press it through. There is a little trick to that. If you can see, these right here are spacers. Now I'm going to press these in between on this side and that side to make sure that we have the proper gap for installing our chain. This is the only way to make sure that you have the rivet pressed in far enough, is to have these spacers. I don't sell these. I'll find a link to some, that way you guys can use them. You can do it without it, it just doesn't guarantee the proper fitment, and you'll either have increased wear or increased wear and break your chain. So this is pretty important. Okay, so I used the press and just lightly pressed the rivet through, just enough so that it sits on there. You can see there's still quite a bit of space comparatively. So what I'm going to do now is place these spacers in as I told you that I would. So you're just going to go down and sit one right in there. It doesn't need to go all the way in, just sit on top, and then put the other on the other side. And now I can go ahead and fully press those in and know that I will not over tighten that rivet through and cause increased wear or too much stress on it. And then from there, and I don't want to put them too tight, just snug them up against it so that you can still pull them out. Alright guys, so we have the rivets pushed through on the link, and now we're going to rivet those with an anvil. So as you can see, they're not sticking out too much, about the same as the others before the anvil, and the thickness is also the exact same. So that's what those spacers are good for. Sometimes people ask, how much should you rivet those? Well, let's take a look at the pin that we pushed out. Let me get it on camera so you can see it here. If you can see that, there really isn't much of a bevel on that at all, really. It's just enough to keep it captive without causing increased resistance as that's rotating around. And then the tool to do that with is this setup right here. Same tool, just different attachments. So you have the anvil up on that side, and then you have block in the rear to keep it from pushing back through, and that's what creates our anvil. Okay, we have those rivets. Well, we made the rivets using an anvil, and you can see it's just slightly larger than what it was. Nothing too extreme, the metal's not deformed, nothing like that. Excuse the darkness that you're seeing on those links. They're just from the gloves. Gloves that get used, they get oily, and moves the oil around, but there really isn't any dirt on the links. So now the next step is to go ahead and clean it. There's a lot of excess grease. Well, it's actually a lithium white-based grease, and that flings off everywhere once this chain starts going around. So we're going to get the excess off, the stuff that's on the outside, not in between the O-rings. And the other thing that we're going to do, if you can tell, see how much grease there is comparatively everywhere else. This chain needs to break in. So we're going to go ahead and put a little bit of extra grease around those O-rings where the master link is, just to keep everything nice and lubricated and allow it to break in pretty smoothly. The best thing to use to clean this is WD-40 and a rag that won't get caught in the links as you're cleaning it. And just rotate it with your hand. No need to turn it on, and rotate the wheel around. Alright, we got our chain on, cleaned up. It's looking good. Looks really good on the bike. Matches the paint. I'm pretty happy with the way this is coming out. Our steel braided lines, chain, wheel, really popping. If you can notice, the lubricant between the links is still there. We didn't take any of that out. We just took out a lot of the excess that's on the sides, on the bottom, and over the top, but we still have plenty for this chain to break in properly. The next step that we're going to do, there's our master link, looking good, is tighten the chain back up. You want about 1.5 inches of slack. As you can see, we are way too high, which we knew that. We didn't tighten it at all, but tightening it up will bring it back into spec. It's only about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of play in your chain on a sport bike. Dirt bikes, I'm not sure. I would imagine more, but I don't know that number off the top of my head. Alright, we have the chain adjusted. Our slack is just about 1.5 inches from top to bottom, from the dead center position. And this is going to stretch a lot as soon as we start riding it, so keep an eye on that. We've got our lock nut snugged up, back up against the frame. Now we're going to torque down our axle. And you want those at about 70-75 pounds. Some bikes are higher, but there really is not a necessity to go higher than 70-75 pounds. It will not back off. As we tighten this, the swing arm is actually going to fold into itself a little bit. This actually makes the length slightly longer, so our chain is going to tighten up a little bit more. Make sure we're still within the range from 1 inch to 1.5 inches of free play in the chain, and don't forget to put your cotter pin back through. Okay, this part is the most important part of this entire job. Tightening that back down. Torque spec is 92 foot-pounds of torque, and then making sure that you fold the lock ring back over the nut. 2 ways to do this. Mind you, you're going to spin this way. One thing you can do is put a rod. I use the lift handle for a jack because it's padded, and you put it down and through between the wheel and the swing arm, so that way when you spin it, it'll hit at the bottom of the swing arm and allow you to tighten that. The other way is to have somebody hold the rear brake and keep the back tire from spinning, which sometimes isn't enough to allow you to put enough torque on the counter sprocket nut and be able to put the proper amount of torque on it, and then the lock ring. Okay, we got our lock ring back on and over the nut. It's torqued at 92 foot-pounds. Now what we need to do is put our sprocket cover back on and enjoy our new chain. overall, I think it's a huge compliment to the bike. Still braided lines, and then the chain to go with it. It'll look a lot better in the daytime. This is the dark side of the bike with the lighting that I have in the garage. But that's that. If you have any questions, comment, like the video, message me. Anything that you guys have that I can answer, I will answer for you. All right, take care.